In this video, we will learn how to pass data among components, especially how to pass data from parent component to child component, and from child component to parent component. Once again, I'm showing you this picture since I really want every student to understand how we organize a modern Vue app. A modern Vue app is a tree of nested components. So what we're doing here is we're defining all those components and then put them together in the form of a tree. Then some students will ask, why do I need to pass data from parent to child and from child to parent? Let me show you an example here. In this example, there is a parent component and there is a child component. So the light gray area here is the parent, and here is the child component. Now, if we're going to implement this in HTML, it looks like this. So div ID equal to app, so this is the parent, and this blog post is a global component, or maybe a local component that we created. So, and we're invoking it inside this parent component. However, what if the parent has the data? In this case, will be the title and the content of this post. So the parent needs to pass the data, that is, the title of the post and also the content of the post, to this tag or this child component. So this child component can display on the page. That's a scenario that we need to pass data from parent to child. Later on, I'm going to talk about why we need to pass data from child to parent. But first, let's focus on this direction, from P to C. So let's go to VS Code. So now I'm in 05, passing data to child component.html. In this example, we're going to demo you how to pass data from parent to child. In this case, the child component is this blog post, but we haven't defined it yet. So our first job is to complete blog post component. I'm going to use global component. The name of the component is blog post. Then this is the detail of this component. So here is the template. Inside this template, I'm going to create a div, and then down here, I'm going to close it. Inside this div, first, let's print a message to show that we have successfully defined a component. And then the data is defined as a function. And the initial value of message is hello blog post. Okay, so right click, we're going to view in browser. As you can see, we successfully print the child component's content, the template. Next, I'm going to show you how to pass data from parent component to child component. As you know, for a blog post, we should have a title and a content, right? Let's assume that those two data are available in the parent, that is in this Vue instance. And how do we pass them to this component so we can display it here? How do we accept or receive the two data in a component? So first, let's talk about how to receive. Next, I'm going to show you how to pass it from parent to child. In component, there is an option called properties or props. So besides template, data, and also methods and other options, there is one extra called props. And the value of props is an array. And inside this array, you can define as many properties you want to receive as possible. And in this case, we only define two because we only receive two data from the parent. The first one is title. The second one is content. Once we define the two props, then we can use the two props in this div, in this template. So besides message, I'm also going to print title and content. I'm going to concatenate them together. I'm going to put some dashes to make sure that things are not cluttered together. So first, this is title. Then next, we have dashes, and we're going to print the content. All right, in div, we're printing three variables, if you want to call them. First one, MSG, is from data. Now, you're all familiar with this one. We're going to print hello blog post. The second and third one, and we're receiving them from our parent. So right now, I don't know what that is. It really depends on what is passed to me, to the component. How do we pass data from parent to child? Okay. Once we defined props, in this case, there are two props, title and content, for a component, then we can use these two as attributes of this tag. So what I mean here is, now here is a tag, blog post, but remember, HTML tag can have some attributes, for example, ID, name, and so on and so forth. But in this case, once we define the two props, then we can use title and content as the two custom attributes of this tab. So let's say we're going to pass title to it. So the title of my blog post is what is a muggle, for example. And the content, and you remember that you can also use content as a custom attribute, is a muggle is a person who lacks any sort of magical ability. Okay, so let me format it. As you can see, this is our tag, and we're including two custom attributes, which is title and content. So this is how we pass two values or two strings from the parent, this is the parent, to this child component, blog post. Okay, once this child component receives these two, so this one is copied into this title, the first prop, and this one is copied into the second prop, and then we can use it in the template and render it on the page. Let me right click and view in browser. You will see three different things printed on the page. A message, which is hello blog post, then title, what is a muggle, and also the explanation of this muggle. View in browser. This is message, this is the first prop and the second prop. Now you know how to pass data from parent component to child component. Let's do a summary here. First, we're going to define props in the component. In this case, we define two props, title and content. Once we define the two props, then we have two additional attributes available in the blog post HTML tag. The first one is title and content. And this is how we pass data from parent to child. This what is a muggle will be passed to the first prop, and the second string will be passed to the second prop. And we can use it inside this component. In this case, we print it in template, title and content. What if I have a third one? So here I'm going to type ABC random one. Okay. Once I define a third prop, then in this tag, I got an additional attribute called ABC, and I can assign values. By using props, we can pass data from parent to child. So let me delete this. Now here is another scenario. In this case, we assign the value to the attributes directly. This is a string and this is a string, so everything looks good. Now, what if the two, this title and content, they are already defined in the data object of the parent? For example, in here, right now, data is empty. What if we already have a title? What is a muggle? And also a content. So P here means parent. And we want to pass this P title to this title and P content to this content. In other words, binding, right? We're binding the first property of this parent to blog post. So think about this. How do we achieve this? How do we bind some data we define here to an attribute of an HTML tag? The answer is we're going to use v-bind. So if you forget v-bind, I include a link to that video below this video. All right, so we're going to use v-bind to bind p-title to title, to bind p-content to content. All right, here's how we do it. So first, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to comment it out, and then paste. Now this time, I'm not going to directly assign the value to the attribute inside this tag. Now instead, I'm going to bind p-title to this title. Now, this is not possible, so we have to use v-bind and colon. And same thing for the next one, v-bind. So we're not binding the value directly to it. We're binding a property we defined in the parent component. Here is p-content. All right, if you remember that, we can omit v-bind. This one is optional. Okay. So the difference between this one and this one, they have the same effects, right? Same effects is that here we're binding a value directly to the title attribute. But this time we're binding p-title, which is defined down here, to this title using v-bind. And we have to put colon in front. Okay. Once again, if you forget v-bind, make sure you check the video. Okay. So this time I'm going to launch it in browser. As you can see, it's the same content. Now I'm in 06 passing data to child component 2.html. In this example, we're going to show multiple posts on the page. In demo 5, we know how to show one post, which is what is a Muggle. Now this time, we have an array of posts. Let me scroll down. Here is my view instance, which is the parent component. In the parent component, we defined a posts data property. In here, we have 4 posts. Now this is the first one with ID, title, content. This is the second one, third one, and fourth one. So our goal is we're trying to pass them to 4 blog post tags so we can show all of them on the page. So apparently we cannot do this in one tag because one blog post tag only show one blog post. Do you remember how to iterate an array and show the content of this array on the page using view? We should use the view directive v-4. Here's how I do it. v-4 and is equal to post in posts. If you still remember this syntax, it's very similar to for each. So this posts refers to the posts here. And this post is that every single post in this posts array. Now for every post, after we get this post, we're going to assign this post dot title and the post dot content to the props here, props. So what we do here is we're using v-bind, title is equal to post dot title, content is equal to post dot content. If you still remember my lecture about v-4, is every time you use v-4, it is always recommended that we add a key. Again, if you forget what this means, take a look at my v-4 video. v-4, we're going to make sure there's something unique, which is post.id. So we're not showing this, but we simply just use this post.id to uniquely identify this blog post. Okay, so this will improve the efficiency of view. Basically, what we do is we're using v-4 to iterate through this posts array, and we're passing each post's title and content to a blog post. After this one is done, we're going to have 4 blog posts. Okay, right click. I'm going to view in browser. So as you can see, we have 4 blog posts. This is the first one, second, third, and fourth. So this is how we use components with v-4. There is one small thing that bugs me in the previous example, is that we're using v-4 to iterate every post in the posts, right? So once we get this post, we're passing post.title to title, post.content to content, because we defined 2 props in here, title and content. In other words, this component only accepts title and content. That's why we have to explicitly pass post.title and post.content. In this small example, there's no problem because every post has only 3 properties, ID, title, and content. So no problem, we only have 3 lines here. What if we have more properties for each post? For example, besides title and content, we also have published date or author, number of likes, and so on and so forth. Let's say we have 10 more properties for each post. Then that means we have to define, let's say 10 props. And here we're going to use 10 lines to do post.something, assign it to a prop. So that's really tedious. That makes your code very long, right? Can we modify this code so we can make it short. Of course, why not we just pass this post, right? Since here we got this post from v4, why not here I just pass post to it, okay? And once this guy accepts post inside this template, inside this component, then we can use post dot to get all the properties. Of course, if you're using this one, :post using vbind, right? Of course, in the props, we no longer need title and content. So I'm going to delete them and only use one. It's called post. So this post is really a JS object. And once we get this post, now here we can no longer use title. We have to use post dot. And here, post dot. Now, if I have a more, we can do post dot author or post dot number of likes, post dot publish date, and so on and so forth. That make your code more clean. So instead of passing all those properties one by one, why not we just pass an entire JS object? Because this one encapsulates all those properties. And inside this component, we can unpackage it and do everything using object dot syntax. If I run it, we'll get the same content. But our code here looks much cleaner. Our blog post example works well so far. So we know how to pass data from parent component to this blog post child component. Now we get a new feature request from our client. Remember, our client always wants more features. Our client says, since we have so many blog posts, I really want to categorize them. For example, there is a category called Harry Potter, and then I want to put all the related posts about Harry Potter under that category. What should we do? How can I modify our code to reflect this change? The answer is we can have more components. We're going to define a new component called blog category and nest all those posts. So let me show you what I mean. In this new design, we still have our parent component. So this means is the view instance. But under it, we have a new component called blog category. For example, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, and so on and so forth. Inside this category, we can have one or more blog posts. The component directly under our view instance is no longer blog post. It is blog category. And inside blog category, we can have one or more blog posts. You can see this is the grandparent, and this dark gray is the father or mother, and here is the child. So the nesting relationship becomes more complex. Let's look at how we do this in VS Code. Now I'm in 08, passing data to child component 4.html. In this file, we have already defined a component, blog post, which is these small gray boxes here. Next, I'm going to define a new component, blog category, and have this component nest one or more blog posts. So let's work on it. First, I'm going to collapse this. And under here, we're going to define a new component, blog category, also as a global one, component. So the name is blog category. And then we're going to specify the details in here. First is template. In the template, there is a div, and down here, I'm going to close this. You can only define one div in the template. For example, if you use a different div as a sibling, this is not allowed. So in the template, you can only have one div as the root. Now you can define more divs inside, but you cannot have two sibling divs. Okay, so in this div, we're going to have one or more blog posts. What I'm going to do is I will just copy this. Now remember, this is from the previous example, and paste it here. So what happened here is in this component, we're nesting a previous defined component. This is a new component, and in this new component, we're using the component we defined before, which is blog post. So these two components will accomplish this. Now what happened here? I can delete this one and simply just having block category, and here I can close this. Done. So this is the first component, and this is the second component, and we're putting the second component, which is block category, directly under div id equal to app. So this piece of code is equivalent to our drawings here. All right, next I'm going to launch this. View in browser. So what happened here? If I press F12, I got some problem here. It says view warning, property or method posts is not defined. Okay, let's come back. In this component here, we're using post in posts. But where do we get these posts? The answer is we're getting these posts directly from our parent, which is here. So that means in this component, besides template, we should also define something called props. And in these props, we're going to accept something called hosts. Then this is step one. Step two is parent in here. We're going to pass these posts to it. Posts. So this post here is referring to the posts in the data of this view instance. And this post is referring to the prop, or the first, there's only one prop. So now, if you look at this picture here, the parent is passing posts as an array to block category, and inside we're using v-4 to iterate each block post. Okay, so let's save, and we're going to run it again. So refresh. Now you can see all those posts, and there's no problem here. Do you remember we have installed something called View DevTools, which is this icon here? So let's take a look at the components tree. So we click here and go to View. So on the root, there is a block category. And under this block category, there are 4 blog posts. So we have 1, 2, and 3 components. And this is their nesting relationship.